You know that feeling when you click add to cart on a camcorder that looks slick in the pictures, only to end up with wobbly footage that feels more like a home video nightmare than the polished travel vlog you imagined? I've seen that happen to a lot of people who are trying to upgrade from a phone camera or a cheap point-and-shoot, and the disappointment can be pretty harsh. That's why I'm breaking down the Sony FDR AX43 in a way that helps you decide if it's the right tool for the moments you actually want to capture, before you spend your hard-earned money. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the day-to-day experience of turning this camcorder on and getting it to do what you need. The AX43 is built around Sony's balanced optical steady shot, which is essentially a tiny gimbal baked right into the body. In practice, that means you can walk through a crowded market, swing a shoulder, or even hop on a bike and still get a shot that stays surprisingly level. I tried filming a weekend hike with a friend who was constantly changing pace, and the footage stayed smooth enough that I could actually edit it without throwing in a bunch of stabilization plugins. For someone who isn't a seasoned gimbal operator, that built-in steadiness is a huge confidence booster. Autofocus is another pain point that trips up a lot of beginners. The fast intelligent AF on the AX43 tracks moving subjects with a speed that feels almost reflexive. I set the camcorder to a walking dog in a park, and the focus stayed locked as the dog darted between trees, never hunting or hunting for the nose. The system isn't perfect. If you put a tiny object at the edge of the frame, it can momentarily hunt, but for the typical family event, sports practice, or travel montage, it's solid enough that you won't be staring at a blurry subject after the take. Low light performance is where many compact camcorders start to wobble, and here the AX43 does a respectable job given its sensor size. The Zeiss Variosonner T lens lets in a decent amount of light, and the camera's internal processing does a good job of keeping noise in check up to about 30 ISO. When I filmed a birthday dinner with candles flickering, the image stayed clean enough that I didn't have to brighten it dramatically in post. If you're planning to shoot concerts, nighttime cityscapes, or anything that pushes the sensor into the high ISO range, you'll notice some grain, but for most indoor events it's more than adequate. Zoom capability is often the selling point for a Handycam. The AX43 gives you 20 optical zoom, which translates to a useful reach for capturing a speaker on stage or a distant landmark without getting up close. Sony also adds a clear image zoom that extends the reach to 30 in 4K mode and 40 in HD, which is basically a digital enhancement that retains more detail than plain digital zoom. In real use, the 30 extension is handy when you're on a balcony trying to get a close-up of a street performer, though you do start to see a slight softness past the 20 mark. It's a trade-off you can manage, especially because you still keep the 4K resolution, so you can crop and post if you need a tighter frame. Menu navigation on Sony's camcorders sometimes feels like stepping into a tech-savvy cockpit, and that's a fair criticism. The AX43 has a fairly layered menu system with plenty of settings for picture profile, audio, and network connectivity. For a first-time user, the learning curve can be a little steep. You'll spend a few minutes tapping through the setup and movie screens before you feel comfortable. That said, the most commonly used functions zoom, focus mode, and exposure are all mapped to dedicated buttons on the side, so you can quickly grab them without diving into the deeper menus. Once you get past the initial friction, you'll appreciate the flexibility the menus give you for tweaking color tones or setting custom audio levels. Battery life is another practical concern. Sony ships the AX43 with a fairly standard NPBF 970 battery that, in my tests, gave me roughly 2 hours of continuous shooting before the indicator turned amber. That's enough for a typical half-day outing, but if you're planning a full-day documentary shoot, you'll want a spare. The good news is the battery is interchangeable, and you can pick up an extra pack for a relatively modest price. The camcorder also supports US power charging, which means you can keep shooting while the battery charges if you have a power bank handy. So, who should actually buy the AX43? If you're a hobbyist who wants a step up from a phone or action cam, someone who enjoys family trips, vlogs, or lighthearted sports footage, this camcorder hits a sweet spot. It offers 4K resolution, a useful zoom range, and reliable stabilization without forcing you to learn a whole new ecosystem of interchangeable lenses. Parents documenting birthdays, travelers who want a compact device that still feels professional, and even small-scale